Helen Miller never expected her quiet suburban life to collapse in a single night. But when Detective Harris uncovered the first hidden clue inside her damaged home, both realized that Derek Miller's arrest was only the beginning of a darker truth no one was prepared to face. Marlo Vexley had lived in Reldon Park for nearly a decade, yet most people still knew very little about him. He kept to himself, walked with a quiet posture, and moved through life as if trying not to disturb the air around him. His small home sat at the edge of town, surrounded by a thin line of trees that seemed to protect him from the world. Every morning, he arrived early at the high school, unlocking the art room before sunrise. The room smelled of paint, old wooden frames, and dried clay. It was the only place where he seemed to breathe naturally. To others, he appeared calm and unbothered, though they never realized how carefully he maintained that image. Ilara Noakes entered his world slowly, almost unnoticed at first. She was a new student who rarely spoke, but her talent was impossible to ignore. Her paintings carried an intensity that made people pause. Her brushstrokes were sharp, filled with emotion she couldn't express in words. Some saw brilliance, others sensed danger. Marlo saw a reflection of a younger version of himself, quiet, observant, and carrying far more pain than anyone could guess. Though he tried to treat all students equally, he found himself watching Ilara more closely, sensing that she was walking along a fragile edge. Ilara's home life made everything more complicated. She lived with her mother, Iris Belcourt, in a cramped apartment above a grocery store. Iris worked long hours, often returning late into the night. The distance between mother and daughter grew silently, leaving Ilara to navigate her struggles alone. Teachers noticed the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she hesitated before answering simple questions. But Ilara hid her emotions well, pouring everything into her art instead. She stopped socializing with classmates and spent most afternoons in the art room, claiming she needed more time to finish her projects. Sheldon Crest, a local journalist known for chasing unconventional stories, had recently been assigned a feature about student achievements in Reldon Park. While gathering interviews, he stopped by the art class and saw Ilara working alone. Her canvas showed a landscape heavy with shadows, as if something lurked behind the trees. Crest felt an uneasy sensation, the kind that tugged at instincts developed from years of reporting. Ilara looked like someone carrying a fear too large for her age. He made a mental note to look into her background later, not realizing how significant that thought would become. Life in Reldon Park continued peacefully until the morning the town discovered Ilara was missing. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Students arrived at school to find police vehicles in the parking lot. Teachers whispered in staff rooms with anxious faces. Rumors traveled from hallway to hallway, each version worse than the last. No one knew what had happened. Ilara's backpack had been found behind the gym, but there were no signs of her. Her locker looked untouched. Her last assignments sat neatly on a desk. It was as if she had simply disappeared. Detective Rion Mercer was assigned to lead the investigation. He approached every case with patience, but this one unsettled him from the start. Something felt wrong, in a way he couldn't fully explain. As he walked through the school corridors, he observed the details others overlooked. The faint scuff marks near the back doors, the missing camera footage from a hallway camera that had malfunctioned the night before, the subtle anxiety in Marlo Vexley's eyes when asked about Ilara's last day. Marlo claimed she had stayed after class briefly to work on a painting. Nothing about his statement was unusual, yet something about his behavior lingered in Mercer's mind. Iris Belcourt arrived at the police station later that day, her face pale with shock. She admitted her relationship with her daughter had become strained. Ilara had withdrawn into herself during recent months, spending hours painting behind closed doors. Iris had assumed it was normal teenage behavior. Now, she feared she had missed something important. Mercer listened carefully, noting every detail. The separation between mother and daughter provided no clear motive, but it revealed a deeper loneliness surrounding Ilar, As the search team expanded their efforts, a volunteer discovered Ilara's sketchbook near the riverbank. The water had damaged several pages, but the final painting remained visible. A dark figure stood behind a girl, stretching like a shadow, reaching for her. The faceless figure sent a jolt through everyone who saw it. To some, it was only art. To Mercer, it was a message left by someone terrified for the first time. He understood that this was more than a simple disappearance. Something far more disturbing had been happening long before Ilara vanished, and the truth had only just begun to surface. The discovery of Ilara's sketchbook marked a turning point in the investigation. Detective Rion Mercer spent hours studying the damaged pages, searching for anything that resembled a clue. He paid attention to the shapes, the color choices, and the positions of the figures. Each painting showed Ilara in different places around town, but always with the same presence, watching her from a distance. The faceless shape troubled him the most. It was drawn over and over, as if Ilara wanted someone to understand that she wasn't imagining it. Mercer began to believe the sketchbook represented events from her real life rather than creative expression. If someone had been following her, they had planned her disappearance long before she was taken. While the police moved forward with their investigation, Sheldon Kress pursued his own leads. The journalist had a habit of digging deeper than necessary, driven by a desire to uncover truths others preferred to ignore. After speaking with several students, he learned that Ilara had grown noticeably nervous in the weeks before she vanished. She often checked over her shoulder, avoided walking home alone, and spent long hours in empty hallways, long after classes ended. Students mentioned she spent most of her time with Marlo Vexley, who allowed her to work in the art room after school. Some believed her closeness to him was harmless, while others found it unusual. Crest felt torn between curiosity and suspicion as he continued gathering information, shaping a storyline he didn't yet understand. Marlo Vexley, meanwhile, carried his own private turmoil. He continued teaching as if nothing had changed, but the tension in his body revealed the truth. He avoided eye contact with coworkers, kept conversations brief, and locked the art room door whenever he stepped outside. His nervous behavior drew attention from staff members who had previously defended him. Whispers began circulating, painting him as someone hiding a secret. Marlo felt the weight of judgment pressing against him, yet he remained silent, fearful that speaking up would only worsen the scrutiny. As days passed, Mercer focused on building a timeline of Ilara's final movements. The missing camera footage from the school troubled him greatly. That hallway rarely malfunctioned, yet on the night before Ilara vanished, the recording cut out for several hours. A maintenance worker claimed it had been a simple technical issue, but something about his explanation felt incomplete. Mercer suspected someone had tampered with the system intentionally. He expanded the investigation to include the school's staff and anyone with access to security controls. During a second search of the riverbank area, Mercer discovered a piece of torn canvas cloth wedged between several stones. The texture and quality were unusual. It was the type of material used by advanced artists, not common students. The discovery immediately shifted his focus toward individuals with specialized knowledge of art supplies. Marlo Vexley became an unavoidable name on the list. Although nothing directly linked him to Ilara's disappearance, the evidence kept circling back to the art department. Sheldon Krest made progress of his own when he uncovered financial details about Osric Vale, a wealthy donor known for funding creative programs in the region. Vale was a respected figure with influence across multiple institutions. Yet Krest discovered inconsistencies in how his contributions were used. Money allocated to the school's art program had gone missing months earlier. No one had questioned it at the time, but paired with Ilara's disappearance, the oversight now felt significant. Krest wondered if the missing funds were connected to something far more serious. Mercer continued, questioning staff and students. During one late evening inspection of the school, he found the locked storage room behind Marlo's supplies. The small room contained only a single canvas on an easel. The painting depicted a calm field with soft colors. It seemed peaceful, almost artificial, as if created to distract from internal chaos. Mercer sensed an emotional struggle behind the painting, but it offered no clues. Everything he found in Marlowe's workspace felt strangely neutral, as if someone had intentionally removed anything suspicious. Despite numerous breakthroughs, every piece of evidence created more confusion. Each clue contradicted the next, forming a web that refused to align with a single explanation. Mercer considered the possibility that someone was deliberately manipulating the investigation. If the person responsible was acting with support, the case could run much deeper than a single crime. Brown's anxiety grew. Each day Alara remained missing. Posters filled shop windows. Volunteers searched woods and abandoned lots, and families kept their children close. Yet the most unsettling thought lingered beneath the surface. Someone in Reldon Park had been watching Alara for a long time, and that same person might still be watching others. Mercer knew one thing with absolute certainty. The truth behind Ilara's disappearance was far more complicated than anyone wanted to believe. The deeper he dug, the more he felt the presence of an unseen force weaving through the town, shaping outcomes in the shadows. 2 weeks after Ilara Noakes vanished, Reldon Park no longer felt like the small, peaceful town it once was. The streets grew quieter, shop owners closed earlier, and parents kept a close watch on their children. Fear had settled into daily life. People whispered theories in grocery aisles and parking lots, each story more unsettling than the last. The disappearance had become a shadow stretched across everything, darkening even the simplest routines. Detective Rian Mercer refused to lose momentum, despite the slow progress. He spent long hours in his office, reviewing statements, camera logs, and evidence reports. Every detail mattered. Every gap in the timeline felt like a hidden doorway leading to an answer he had not yet found. He was particularly disturbed by the idea that someone had been watching Alara for weeks, possibly months. Her drawings were not random expressions of imagination. They were warnings that she hadn't known how to communicate. While Mercer pushed forward, Sheldon Crest made a discovery that shifted the investigation. After gaining permission from Iris Belcourt, he examined Ilara's laptop, which had been untouched since the day she disappeared. The files seemed ordinary, at first school documents, unfinished art projects, and emails. But Crest noticed a strange folder buried deep within the system. It was protected by layers of encryption, far too sophisticated for a teenager to create on her own. With help from a cyber analyst he trusted, Crest cracked the code and accessed the hidden messages. Inside the folder were entries written over several weeks. Alara described the feeling of being followed, the sense that someone moved behind her, even when she saw nothing. She wrote about the faceless figure from her drawings, claiming it appeared in reflections, shadows, and late evenings when she walked home. The messages were short, but filled with quiet terror. They revealed that she had tried to tell someone, but chose not to, fearing she would sound unstable or dramatic. Crest printed the entries and immediately delivered them to Mercer. Realizing their value to the case, the identity of the person she communicated with was unclear. The sender's profile had no picture, no personal details, and no traceable history. It had been created 3 months before her disappearance, and had exchanged only a handful of messages with her. The more Mercer studied the account, the more convinced he became that someone who knew Alara personally had created it. The sender referenced specific locations in the school, details about her schedule, and moments from her past. The clues pointed toward someone who had daily access to her life. Mercer revisited the school's security footage, searching for anything unusual. Most clips showed typical school activity, but one recording stood out. Late at night, a hooded figure walked across the courtyard, carrying something heavy over their shoulder. The footage was too blurry to identify the person, but the walk was distinct, slow, steady, and deliberate. Mercer compared it mentally to Osric Vale, whose gait carried the same rhythm. But Vale's alibi was supported by several witnesses at a charity dinner on the same night. Mercer could not ignore the possibility that someone was intentionally imitating Vale's movements, or that the witnesses themselves were influenced by his authority. Sheldon Crest, unwilling to drop any lead, followed a tip about a storage facility on the outskirts of town. The unit had been rented under a fake name 2 weeks before Ilara disappeared. Its location made it nearly invisible to passing traffic. When Crest arrived, he found old newspapers scattered across the floor, all covering missing teens from nearby towns. The connection between their disappearances became clear. They were all talented in creative fields. The pattern was too precise to dismiss. At the back of the unit stood a metal locker. Its surface was scratched and dented, as if it had been moved many times. Before Crest opened it, Mercer arrived, having tracked Crest's movements through a source. They pried the lock open together. Inside, they found a box holding personal items belonging to several missing teens: paintbrushes, small sketchbooks, and accessories. One bracelet bore Ilar's initials. The evidence confirmed what Mercer had feared. This was not an isolated event, but part of a larger pattern. Someone had been targeting young artists for years, operating quietly and evading detection. The disappearance of Ilara Noakes was only the latest in a long chain of carefully planned crimes. As the two men stood in the dim storage unit, the realization hit them like a heavy weight. The case they were trying to solve did not involve a single kidnapper or a random act of violence. It pointed to something organized, calculated, and deeply rooted in structures of influence that had been present in the town long before Ilara ever arrived. The discovery inside the storage unit shifted the investigation from a missing person case to something far more alarming. Detectives recognized that Ilara's disappearance was only one part of a wider pattern that had been quietly unfolding for years. The items found inside the locker tied her to other vanished teens who had never been located. Their stories had faded from the public mind, lost within scattered reports and forgotten family pleas. Now, their belongings lay together in a single metal box, suggesting they were connected in a way no one had been willing to see before. Detective Rian Mercer worked with renewed urgency. He studied every case file linked to the missing teens, searching for overlapping details. Each story shared one striking similarity. All the missing youths were involved in creative programs funded by Osric Vale. Vale's polished reputation made him nearly untouchable in the eyes of the public. His contributions supported galleries, school departments, and community centers. People admired him, trusted him, and welcomed him with open arms. Yet the deeper Mercer looked, the more he saw a pattern of influence that stretched far beyond what seemed reasonable. Sheldon Crest, driven by the discovery, pushed further into Vale's financial background. Through careful examination of archived tax documents, donation receipts, and bank records, he uncovered large payments made to a private contractor. The contractor was a former security officer who had disappeared from public life years earlier. The transactions were scattered and hidden between legitimate expenses, but they formed a trail that suggested secret operations. It became apparent that Vale did not act alone. He had created a structure of people who carried out his instructions quietly, leaving no trace behind. The police obtained a warrant and searched Vale's mansion. The property was massive, filled with halls that seemed designed to intimidate visitors. On the surface, everything looked clean and ordinary, but hidden doors and concealed compartments soon came to light. Investigators discovered small rooms fitted with cameras, document storage boxes, and files that contained detailed information about numerous youths connected to creative programs. Each file described personal backgrounds, strengths, weaknesses, and daily routines. The level of detail showed long-term observation rather than casual interest. Despite the disturbing findings, Ilara was still missing, and her immediate safety remained the priority. Mercer shifted focus back to Marlo Vexley, whose anxiety continued to increase. Multiple community members reported seeing him pacing late at night, always glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting something to happen. When questioned again, Marlo finally revealed a hidden truth from his past. Years earlier, He had been drawn into a youth development program funded by Vale. The program had appeared innocent, offering guidance and opportunities to creative teens. Marlowe realized too late that it served as a funnel for vulnerable individuals. After witnessing unsettling behavior from program organizers, he fled and distanced himself entirely, signing legal agreements that prevented him from speaking publicly. His decision to remain silent left him carrying guilt he had never resolved. With this new information, Mercer began to understand why Marlowe reacted so nervously throughout the investigation. He had recognized the signs in Ilara's behavior, knowing they mirrored his own experiences from years before. His attempts to protect her had been quiet and indirect, shaped by fear of retaliation from powerful figures surrounding Vale. This revelation cleared Marlowe of suspicion and redirected attention toward the larger network operating behind the scenes. Search teams expanded their efforts to include remote forests surrounding Reldon Park. After hours of canvassing rough terrain, a set of partial shoe prints was discovered in a clearing. The pattern matched Ilara's shoes, confirming she had been there recently. Additional marks in the soil suggested movement, as if someone had dragged or guided her through the area. Mercer followed the trail until it brought the team to a hidden cabin among dense trees. The structure was small, built from aged wood and nearly invisible from the main path. Thick boards covered its windows, and a faint wisp of smoke drifted up from the chimney inside the cabin. Investigators found evidence of confinement. Chains were attached to a wall, blankets were arranged in a corner, and the air smelled of damp wood and something metallic. Drawings were scattered across a small table on finished pieces that showed landscapes broken by dark shapes. The scenes reflected fear and isolation, signs that Ilara had been held captive there. Yet she was nowhere to be seen. As the search team examined the cabin, it became clear that whoever had held Ilara there had left in a hurry. Footprints led away from the site, indicating movement toward other remote areas. The captor had anticipated the search and relocated before authorities arrived. This realization deepened the urgency, gripping the investigation. Ilara had been alive at the cabin, and her captor had moved her again, possibly to a more hidden and dangerous location. With night falling and the forest growing colder, Mercer understood the stakes more clearly than ever. They were racing against someone who had experience, resources, and a long history of evading discovery. Each delay placed Ilara in greater danger. The truth surrounding her disappearance was becoming darker by the hour, and the hunt for her exact location had reached its most desperate stage. The police sirens faded into the distance, and the reporters scattered. The neighborhood finally fell quiet, but the silence felt unnatural, like a house holding its breath right before the walls collapse. Detective Harris stayed behind, staring at the broken front window of the Miller home, trying to make sense of what he had witnessed. The case was officially closed. The suspect was in custody. And yet something in his gut kept twisting, like he had missed a crucial detail. He replayed the last few hours, again and again. Helen Miller's trembling voice, the blood-soaked carpet, the eerie calmness on Derek's face when he confessed. It all lined up, but it still felt too clean, too convenient for a tragedy so brutal. Paris, new families didn't shatter that neatly. Inside the house, the air was thick with the heavy metallic smell of violence. Ellen walked slowly through the living room, touching the back of the couch the way someone touches a gravestone. Soft, careful, afraid to disturb what remains. This room had once been full of noise. Her daughter laughing on video calls, her husband's loud opinions during football games, the occasional argument over bills or chores. Now, it was a museum of silence. She stood in the doorway and tried to breathe, but every inhale scraped her ribs from the inside. In the interrogation room earlier, Derek hadn't shown regret, fear, or even anger. He just stared at the table, tapping it with one finger, humming under his breath. A melody that felt familiar, like a tune Helen had heard before at their family barbecue. A detail so small that it made her blood turn cold as it clicked into place. Hours later, Back in the house, she heard it again, not in her memory, but faintly drifting through the walls. A soft, tuneless hum. She froze. Derek was in custody. No one else was inside. Yet the sound was unmistakable. Helen forced herself to move toward the hallway, each step slow and deliberate. The humming grew clearer. For a moment she wondered if stress had finally snapped something in her mind. But the vibration under her feet proved otherwise. Someone was upstairs. Harris had been about to leave when he saw Helen's silhouette in the window, rigid, unmoving, like she had turned to stone. Something in her posture made him walk back toward the house. He knocked once. No answer. He pushed the door open. The moment he stepped inside, he sensed it. A faint humming radiating from the second floor, like a heartbeat hidden behind walls. "Helen," he called out, but his voice sounded small, swallowed by the house's suffocating quiet. She was standing at the bottom of the staircase, eyes fixed upward. "He's not alone," she whispered, barely audible. Harris didn't understand at first. He started up the stairs, one hand on his gun, the other brushing the railing. But halfway up, he heard it low, rhythmic, almost playful. Not a man's voice. Higher, softer, like a child humming to themselves while coloring. The sound was coming from the guest bedroom. Harris pushed the door open fast, ready, but the room was empty. The humming ceased instantly, as if it had slipped between the cracks of reality. Harris stepped inside, scanning every inch. Nothing. No footprints. No open windows. No hiding spots. Nothing disturbed. Helen stood in the doorway, her fingers trembling. She whispered, "That's the song my daughter used to hum when she couldn't sleep." Harris felt a cold pressure spread across his shoulders. He tried to speak, but the house answered first. A soft creaking, then a slow, deliberate tap-tap on the wall, exactly the same rhythm Derek had tapped during his confession. Helen's eyes widened. He said he heard her. He said she never left the house. A fresh dread wrapped around Harris. Derek wasn't humming out of madness. He was repeating something, mimicking, echoing. The floorboards behind them shifted, soft as a breath. Harris turned sharply, gun raised, but only shadows stared back. The humming started again, this time behind the walls, moving through the house like something alive, something listening, something that had never left. Helen slowly backed away, whispering, "We thought the killer was the only one in the house that night." Harris finally understood why nothing had made sense. There had been someone else there, and they were still here.